to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a student of nature-led gardening, and someone experiencing the early summer abundance. Mulberries, alpine strawberries, they're actually the best strawberries I've ever had. Honeybush berries, white currants. You can put them in vodka and save them that way. I'm experimenting with that, and it seems to be, I'm optimistic for that. Lots of fresh greens, onions. So I'm grateful that I've been in a place for decades, and every year we planted a few bushes, and we're reaping the rewards. But the rewards are so much more than food. I'm seeing swallowtail butterflies. I'm listening to birds. Robins love mulberries. They will squawk at you if you eat from the mulberry tree. But there's so much. There's plenty. There's a power in knowing about the abundance that I think is our birthright, especially in challenging times. And joining me now is someone I think that agrees on that natural birthright of abundance. Chef Lachelle Cunningham. She's the owner and CEO of Healthy Roots Institute, Shell's Kitchen, City Food Studios. She's the executive director of Frogtown Farm, 2026 Minneapolis Public Health Hero, and a 2024 Bush Fellow. Welcome to Food Freedom Radio.
Thanks, Laura. So glad to be back.
Yeah. And so do you agree on that it's really an abundant, wonderful world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We just got to tap into it. You know, the way that our kind of sometimes society and world is set up is kind of gets us into this mode of scarcity, right? And that's understandable, you know, what people have gone through and traumas and different things like that. And sometimes we just have to be able to get in the right mindset to really break through on that.
And we ended that last time we were on the show. We just ended with this conversation, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite you back, because scarcity is also literally spelled Scar City. I mean, it's Scar City, and so we're living in Scar City. But I think we're meant to live in abundance. I think that is our birthright, and it's what we need to try to help lift up. Absolutely. And yet it is so hard, especially in these times, because it's not mirrored in our economic systems are so grounded on almost an objectification or a colonization. Or what do you think the problem is? I should ask that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely multiple levels. I think, you know, our history and people trying to reconcile, you know, history and us as people and how we've, you know, evolved and moved together as people, as culture, as a civilization. But then also it's like what's right in front of us now but how we got here, right? And I think we got here through, you know, industrialization and kind of maybe detaching from the land and really that birthright of abundance, definitely through a lot of different systems, I would say, right? And so how do we operate in those systems and reform them from within so that we can link that abundance in there, right? And so I think so many times, you know, me personally, right, just doing the work that I do, being called by community to do so many things, you can lose sight of that important thing just in the busyness of doing the right thing many times. And so I think there's different levels to it of people's personal experiences and the opportunities that we get. And then how do we utilize those opportunities to build something that's more regenerative?
So give us a little bit of your background. Share your story.
Absolutely. So I'm a chef. I actually, you know, started my career off more in the nonprofit administrative project management space for many years. And then in my 30s, I decided to change careers and go into food, become a chef, started a catering company while I was going to culinary school, started teaching cooking workshops at like community ed type of style. And then that quickly evolved into becoming an executive chef and helping launch a restaurant in collaboration with Appetite for Change, Breaking Bread Cafe over North Minneapolis. I didn't mention Shell's Kitchen was my original catering business. And then as I grew in that role of running that restaurant for several years, did great work in community. Appetite for Change is a great organization. And also I'm an entrepreneur at heart and definitely needed to kind of break out on my own and really tap into my own equity that I was, you know, putting in that work. And so I ended up leaving there, the restaurant after 3 years in 2018. I ended up relaunching my catering business and also launching Healthy Roots Institute, the concept at that time, which I had really started to package all of my, at that point, I started teaching food safety certifications. I started teaching more classes and doing restaurant consulting. And then I ended up segueing into becoming a culinary instructor at St. Paul College. And then about a year later, I ended up taking an opportunity at the Good Acre, which is a local food hub that works with local farmers and helping to support and aggregate them to get access to markets. And so I ended up building a culinary program there, worked there for a couple of years. And then by 2023, I think it was, I ended up kind of pulling all of everything that I did into Healthy Roots Institute and really focusing in. I ended up acquiring the culinary program from the Good Acre and ended up buying a commercial incubator kitchen in South Minneapolis on 38th in Chicago, which is also the home of George Floyd Square. And so I purchased City Food Studio, which is a shared commercial kitchen incubation space for small food businesses, caterers, food trucks, manufacturers, vendors, and the like. And so then really got into more support of food entrepreneurs and food businesses, while also simultaneously stepping into the ag space and becoming the executive director at Frogtown Farm that same year. So a lot happened in 2023. And every year since. So in 2024, I became a Bush Fellow, and I was also a Josie Johnson Leadership Academy Fellow. And just been building and growing on that work ever since. And then, like you said, this year got honored as a community health hero through the city of Minneapolis, and have been doing a lot of work supporting food entrepreneurs in the city of Minneapolis, from navigating licensing to food waste reduction to, just general community work. And so, I mean, there's a lot I could go into, but that's the general space. My favorite thing to do is what I'm doing now, which is retreats. And so I'm out in Osceola, Wisconsin at Acreage, which is a beautiful retreat space for people doing work in community, nonprofits and whatnot. And so I'm out here with the audacious, creative, climate justice writers. It's a women of color writers group that have been getting together to really just hold space with each other and have a safe space to talk about a lot of the issues that a lot of times, when we're often in certain spaces, we can't dig as deep as we can when we're fellowshipping together in this space. So, yeah.
And that, I love the article you wrote for the spokeswoman on soul food as an ancestral practice and well-being. Do you want to just share that article a little bit? I've got you have some beautiful quotes in there. I just
absolutely. I mean, I'm actually writing a new article right now that's due in a couple days amongst all the Juneteenth stuff. So I'm like, what did I say? But no, I mean, what I'm really building with that. So I wrote an article for the Spokesman Recorder in February for Black History Month and really started digging into pot liquor and soul food. And for those who don't know what pot liquor is, it is the broth that gets created when you stew greens or red beans or black eyed peas, and it kind of gets sometimes left in the bottom of the pot, and really it should be consumed because it holds so much nutrients and a story and insight into to me, like the real foundation of soul food. People think about soul food, and it is all those things, right? It's delicious. It's full of all of these different recipes that are often decadent, and but really, where when you get down to the foundation of it, it comes out of ingenuity and really trying to make something out of nothing, really, right? As my enslaved ancestors were often rationed certain items like cornmeal or molasses, and often given throwaway parts of the animals or the plants. And so they had to really think about and create what was going to give them sustenance, and often had to supplement their diets with foraging and trapping and fishing, and sometimes being able to grow their own food. And, when you think about the history of our country, really, at least, United States of America now, a lot of those foundational pieces of what soul food is started with enslaved people. And so really understanding that story and understanding like why it's important not to lose sight of where those beginnings were. When I think about pot liquor and I use that as a tool for storytelling, to me, it's medicine. It's when we think about our first medicines is extracting things into water, right? Making tea, making broths, and then we kind of evolved in understanding what we can do with that as humans, right? To heal ourselves. And so I think I like to carry that theme through and understanding those foundations, but also understanding where our creativity, like what my ancestors did in creating those dishes was about creativity and ingenuity. And many of us, when we make certain meals, it's like, no, this is how you make the mac and cheese. This is how you make the black eyed peas. And of course, those are the foundational pieces that we don't want to lose. But also, how can we understand and really value the virtue of a lot of these ingredients that, we talk about our ancestors that came over in the mid-Atlantic slave trade and how they hid seeds on their bodies and carried them with them as a food source, right? Black eyed peas, the seeds of okra pods and different things like that. And there's a deep story about food and in those traditions, and also understanding, a lot of people think that enslaved Africans were brought here just because of their brute strength, but it was actually a lot of their intellect and knowledge about agriculture and medicine and healing and so many different gifts that they brought with them. And so I love to explore those gifts. So that's why I end up taking a lot of those ingredients like black eyed peas and creating other things like black eyed pea vanilla wafers and making banana pudding, or black eyed pea waffles or pancakes or fritters, cookies, all kinds of different things. There's a West African dish called akara that's made with these black eyed peas. And so that was really like my entry into really thinking about what else I can do with that. Do the same thing with sweet potatoes, right? We have our candied yams, but I make sweet potato cobbler. I make sweet potato ice cream, sweet potato pie ice cream. And
potato pie ice cream.
Yes.
Wow, that sounds so cool. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna read some of it because I love these sentences. I'm honoring the hands that taught me, like the hands that didn't need measuring cups because they carried the knowledge in their body. My hands just know this is muscle memory and it's ancestral memory. And I remember hearing somewhere, like, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And so to kind of open up to this idea of abundance, even though there's so much scarcity around.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes me think about the not using measuring cups. Here at the retreat, what I did was create recipes for the group to kind of cook together over the time. And doing a couple of workshops and things like that here. But, we're talking about following recipes, and some people really feel like, they need those recipes. And I told them it's my mission in life to break us away from needing recipes. Not that we don't need them and we need value them, but at the same time, we don't want to just be stuck in this place of, I need this recipe to make this work. If I don't have those ingredients, what do I have that I can make something and create something that maybe I hadn't even never created before? And so I think there's an opportunity to build and create. And I think about the not using measuring spoons. And when you look back at some of the different terminology that they used to measure, right? There was, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but there was like certain vessels that they used to measure with that weren't measuring spoons and measuring cups, and they would use those, right? Or when you think about pound cake, right? It was a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, right? And trying to keep things so that that's why I write recipes in formulas more so, or that's what I try to push, because it's like, well, yeah, you could make this dish, but you can make this dish different every time based on what you have or what you have available to you. And so even now I measure things, I know what a teaspoon, a tablespoon feels like in my hand. And I like to season with my hand so that I can feel and have this connection with the food. So
And we're going to need to take a break, but I'm going to read another sentence from your writing. Cooking greens is not just culinary practice, it is ritual. And then you talk about the patience is reverence. The kitchen is not separate from history, it's where history breathes. You're listening to Food Freedom Radio. With us right now is Chef Lachelle Cunningham. She's the owner and CEO of Healthy Roots Institute, Shell's Kitchen, City Food Studio, Executive Director of Frogtown Farms, 2026 Minneapolis Health Hero, and a 2024 Bush Fellow. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right, we are on pause now.
I'm ready to hop right back in. Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, great. I'm glad you're having fun. Okay. Yeah, and I should, Lori's, yeah, so we can, okay, I'm ready to hop right back in.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm going to get to it being Juneteenth this weekend and the events.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Previous audio is just set. Now it just completed saving, so we're ready to go. So stand by, and here we go for segment number 2.
Welcome to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Headland, a student of nature-led gardening, and someone very pleased to be joined right now by Chef Lachelle Cunningham. And this is Juneteenth weekend. We're taping this on Thursday. The show will air Saturday, June 20th. But Chef Lachelle, you're doing so much for Juneteenth. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing and just what the meaning of Juneteenth celebration is.
Absolutely. So Juneteenth is that we, in the Black community, we celebrate Juneteenth as, really commemorating that when emancipation happened in 1865, not everyone was made aware of their freedom and their emancipation, and specifically in Galveston, Texas, they actually didn't find out until 2 years later. And so that's really where Juneteenth comes from, is really celebrating the actual realization of freedom. And there's so much that has happened, right? We're almost 200 years later, right? And still needing to celebrate this. Because even when you think about emancipation happening, and even, after people found out, that we then segued into this kind of sharecropping system, which was another form of slavery. And so just being understanding, like, what is freedom and what does it mean when someone isn't honest with you and kind of holds you in this bondage, when and you have to understand and realize that freedom later. And so that's really what Juneteenth is about, or at least the foundations of it. It has evolved over the years and has become celebrations across the country and even world, where people commemorate this date, which is tomorrow, June 19th. And so we have a number of different things that happen all over the Twin Cities. And so tomorrow I'm doing something at Carleton College, but I'm also celebrating with the Soul of the South Side celebration. And that is a big activation over off of Lake Street, not far from where the precinct was burned after George Floyd was murdered. And so we'll be there. There's a huge activation all over. If you go to, I think it's soulofthesouthside.com, you can find out all of the different activations that are happening in the space. Specifically, Healthy Roots Institute has now been joining the celebration. This is our 3rd year doing an activation called Ancestral Food Waves. And so when I started out, it was a little conundrum, because the planner, I had said Ancestral Food Ways, but she heard food waves. And so when she published everything, it was food waves. And I was like, no, this actually makes sense. And you think about the different waves of our ancestors that they had traveled across waves to get here and really sustain themselves and carry their knowledge and practices and food practices forward. And so the first year I ended up doing a demonstration where I made a number of different events from locally sourced, farm fresh produce, and using those same ingredients. I talked about the black eyed peas, the collard greens, the sweet potatoes, and kind of ended up making and kind of demonstrating this. And then they loved it so much. They were like, you have to come back. You have to be an anchor piece in this celebration. And so last year I expanded and started inviting other chefs. So we have different waves of chefs coming in doing different demonstrations. We had 2 additional chefs last year. And now this year we have 5 additional food entrepreneurs that are doing demonstrations throughout the day tomorrow at Soul of the South Side.
And this show airs on Saturday, so we're actually it was yesterday.
Oh, well, yesterday.
I know it's kind of confusing, but
Okay.
you'll also be hosting the movie Farming While Black.
Yep. So that was put out by Soul Fire Farm. I believe it's their second documentary that they put out, and so we will be showcasing that at the farm. So movie on the farm, and we're working on getting some popcorn and inviting community out at dusk to come and view that screening of Farming While Black. And one thing to understand is, after emancipation, freed Black folks, they had farmland. A lot of them, like in my family, we had become a part of the Creek. There was a treaty of 1866 that basically inducted us into the tribe, and part of that, and part of it was we were part of the tribe because many of us had, were descendants of the natives and the Africans that had intermarried, and so there was land that they had been given in Oklahoma, actually, which is, so they had actually traveled as enslaved people on the Trail of Tears with the Creek Nation and the Cherokee Nation. And so they were part of the community long before, right? And so then when they were, the thing that separated them was their color. So many of them that might have been, even on some of the early censuses, were identified as Native or Indian. Later, when they did, the Dawes rolls and these other rolls, they started making them Black or colored. And in that, just being colored and being considered less than a human being, they often lost their rights just due to that identification. And there's a lot of other pieces, but they settled in Oklahoma and had land. And so there was, I think around 16% of the farmland was managed, owned, tended by Black folks. And then now today that's less than 2%. And so, it's, circumstance, but also a little bit by design. Many of my, I'm in the North, I'm in Minnesota now. And it's like, well, why am I in Minnesota now? And it's because my ancestors were fleeing Jim Crow. They were fleeing a lynching. They were fleeing riots, race riots that were happening, such as in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street was. They were actually getting ready to form a Black state. And in that, there were bombs dropped there, and there's evidence of that even today. Me and my dad were just there last week and walked the streets of Greenwood, and I got to see what it looks like now, right? And so, just really digging into that history, we ended up going to the cemetery that is actually now an overgrown forest, and finding the burial sites of our ancestors and the community that was there. And so it's like, well, why wasn't anyone tending to this? Why? Well, they fled, and so we have to understand that, because we call it the Great Migration. And I'm not saying that many people didn't migrate by choice, but many people felt forced to, because they wanted to live. And so they felt forced to flee. And so just a lot of that gets lost in translation in our education system.
And that history, making that history visible, because the history stays visible. I mean, even if it's not known, it's still living in us in some way. And I
Mhm.
did want to, so on June 20th, Saturday, June 20th, which is Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day, but there are events going on the
Throughout
20th.
the weekend, yeah.
So the big one is the, or one is the Community Peace Celebration in honor of Melvin. So you want to talk a little bit about Mr. Peace Bubbles and the
Yes, Mr.
celebration?
Giles, may he rest in peace. Elder Melvin Giles passed away last year, actually after the community peace celebration, and this year is the 30th anniversary. So he started this 30 years ago in really wanting to promote peace, and just happened to tie that into this same weekend. And I think, when we think about what his intention was behind that, right? He wanted to bring peace because all of that trauma, right? It comes up in how we function in that scarcity, right? And so he wanted to bring community together to celebrate peace and the bubbles and the color purple. And he was all about those things. And he was really, I don't want to get emotional, but one of the last deep conversations I had with him, he really held space for me. And I was going through a lot as an executive director of this farm. And so I think tomorrow we're getting together for the first time without him. Or I'm sorry. Yeah.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah.
My days are all,
yeah.
But yeah, we're getting together again for the first time, celebrating the community peace celebration without him. It will be at Carty Park. Now, I grew up a block and a half away from this park, and all the while I was growing up, it was called People's Park. So if you know the People's Park in St. Paul, it's now Carty Park, and that's where the community peace celebration will be happening. I think it's from 2 to 6 p.m.
And there is a website for it. It's got
Yep.
music and free food and a community activity. And the website is very simple. It's Community Peace Celebration, and it's Saturday, June 20th. And that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that community piece?
Yeah, Frogtown Farm will be there. We're actually doing a collaboration with the Mudluck Pottery, and they're bringing out their pottery bus. So Frogtown Farm was founded by artists, and so we really try to uphold that artist piece of it, right? And doing community art together. And so the vision around what I want to build at the farm is a commemorative dedication garden to the founders, but also to Elder Peace. And so he was in charge or had made it his mission to install peace poles in different areas around the city and even country. And so we're going to install a peace pole at Frogtown Farm in dedication to Elder Peace and some other pieces. And so with the pottery activation, we'll be making little garden art and little figurines and little signs for the garden. And then we'll also, the team at Frogtown Farm will be doing some seed art activations. And so we're just kind of getting out there and being artistic and creative and honoring our ancestors and also our living champions of food justice and social justice in our communities.
Absolutely. So if someone's just hearing the phrase Frogtown Farm for the first time and you're the executive director, tell us what it is.
Yeah, so Frogtown Farm is in the neighborhood of Frogtown, which is actually the sister neighborhood of the Rondo community. So if you know about the history of Rondo, and it was a historic Black community, Frogtown is also historic, a very diverse community and right across the street, right, from Rondo. And so Frogtown is a little 5-acre farm. It's actually located on a city park called Frogtown Park. It's on the corner of Victoria and Minnehaha. And so there's a hill, and at the top of the hill, the farm is like 13 acres, but the park is 13 acres, but the farm is 5 of those acres. And we grow food there to combat food insecurity in the Frogtown community and beyond. And now we have evolved since I've become an executive director. We now do grower incubation. So we have a number of different growers that grow on our farm, and we support them through access to the land and resources and education to help evolve them as farmers, but also as food entrepreneurs. And we're really just very grassroots, literally. And so the farm was actually founded back in, I think the site control happened about 2014, 2015, but our first crop was actually in 2016. And so this year is actually 10 years of growing food on the farm. to support our
And
community.
we only have a minute left in this segment, and so I want to touch on this in this next segment because I want to talk about your family, your dad. But one of the things I heard a presentation years ago, maybe even decades ago, from your dad, and
Yeah.
he was really emphasizing the importance of entrepreneurs to create a just system, because if we just keep doing it the same way, we don't own. There's this between human agency and our ownership and how we actually lift up independent living businesses is
Mhm.
so critical, right? And that's your work. That's one of the keystones of your work.
Absolutely. And the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Absolutely. And so it's funny because as a chef, the fact that I'm a chef and doing the work that continues that legacy of what my dad worked on, what his uncle, who ended up raising him and being a big influence on the work that he's doing, my Uncle Mo, we can talk a little bit about him, but then also thinking about our ancestry going back to Black Wall Street, right? So there's a legacy and a history here that I didn't even realize, like I'm still just becoming into and learning why I'm, how like the deep roots of where I am now.
Yeah. So you're listening to Food Freedom Radio. We're talking with Chef Lachelle Cunningham. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
All right, back on pause now.
I'm ready to hop right into it.
All right, I'll do a little math here to get you your final segment time. We're ready to go again. So. All right, should be set here. We got about 14 minutes to work with. And I take it you both are ready to go?
Yep.
Goes by fast.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Here we go on the last segment.
Welcome back to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Headland, a student of nature-led gardening, someone enjoying the early summer abundance, the mulberries, the alpine strawberries, the honeybush berries, the white currants, lots of fresh greens. It's a beautiful world, despite what the TV and all the other stuff tries to tell you. It's an abundant, wonderful world. Very pleased to be joined right now by Chef Lachelle Cunningham. She's the owner and CEO of Healthy Roots Institute, Shell's Kitchen, City Food Studio, executive director of Frogtown Farm, 2026 Minnesota Public Health Hero, and a 2024 Bush Fellow. And, we want to we wanted to talk a little bit about your dad and your uncle and just share your family roots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my dad is Gary Cunningham, who has been long time leader in the community in Minneapolis specifically, and has a long career in doing everything from county administration to really got deep into the work of supporting entrepreneurs and understands and understood that entrepreneurs are the foundation of a healthy economy. And, where we are, where we've come to now in our society with so much corporate, huge corporations kind of leading and often putting those small entrepreneurs at risk. And so he definitely has done that work. He grew up in Minneapolis, between South and North Minneapolis, and had a challenging upbringing, in those times. My Uncle Mo actually. My dad has written a story about this, but my Uncle Mo, a lot, in those days in the 70s, crack cocaine had kind of hit the community really hard. And many of the leaders in the community ended up falling into those addictions. And my Uncle Mo ended up being one of them. But over time, he had basically recovered. And in that recovery, he did some amazing work in the community. He's actually the founder of the Black Panther Party in Minneapolis, and actually was, despite what people think, was really a organization focused on building up the community, and food and feeding people was a big part of that. And so he ended up, I think, breaking away from the party, but he did not stop working until the day he passed away. And he ended up actually starting one of the first urban farms farms, or urban community farms in the country. He had 2 square blocks of farm right in the South Minneapolis community on 35th and 4th, if people know where that is. But and maybe people even remember Uncle Mo because he was very popular in the Central, Bryant, and Seward neighborhoods in South Minneapolis. And he also ended up starting the first co-op, starting of the first Bryant Central Co-op, which was a Black-led co-op, and a precursor to some of the co-ops that now exist. And so there's some big, huge work, and I'm really just learning more about him. But he had a big influence on my dad, who was probably maybe going down the wrong path. And my Uncle Mo took him under his wing, and him and his wife Sharon really helped to steer my dad and bring him and give him experiences that really resonate now to the work that he does now, and was much a big part of what he instilled in me. I was actually born just blocks away from, where those gardens were in South Minneapolis, which is not far from George Floyd Square, same community, 38th Street, Chicago, 3rd and 4th Avenues. And so, I didn't even realize until probably in the last year or two that my dad and I, since my Bush Fellowship and this really intentional journey of healing that I've been on, that we've been digging into. My dad's been doing ancestry research for years now. And so he really holds a lot of that. And so I'm just really sitting at his feet, learning and understanding. And there's still many, many holes. And it's kind of like trying to put back a broken vessel back together. And what we're creating is not another vessel that's identical to the vessel that was broken, but more of a mosaic that also lends to some creativity and artistry to really build something that is sustainable, but also regenerative for our family and our community.
And living. So I'm gonna make a couple jumps, but I shared that because I have so many bushes. I get to see a lot of swallowtails, and then I saw swallowtail butterflies, and then I saw a swallowtail butterfly and all these buildings and freeways, and this poor swallowtail butterfly is just trying to find a place. And then I also saw a plant at a big box store, and I'm like, that plant sort of feels imprisoned, and it's sort of, does this make sense to you when
Absolutely.
I say that, And then I was looking at it kind of came up fast, but a swallowtail butterfly represents profound transformation, hope, resilient, and the free nature of the soul. And so this show is named Food Freedom Radio. This is Freedom Day. June 19th is Freedom Day.
Yes.
But we're not free until we're all free, right? And we have a economic system that really rose from a lot of unhealthy patterns.
Absolutely. That's the struggle. That is the struggle when we talk about the struggle. And I think, from struggle comes strength. And so, I think that's where we can access the abundance at, right? If we get too distracted by the struggle, if we get too burdened down and held down by that struggle, it's harder for us, right? We're being held down by that scarcity, right? And so, and sometimes it's just as much as a mindset shift, right? So one thing that this makes me think about is one of my favorite things to do in my work is cook with, I'm a chef, obviously, but with everyday people, right? Because I train professionals, I train, entrepreneurs in the culinary and food space, but it's really the work with everyday people, with community members, that I find the most profound impact of, and also where those scarcity mindsets show up when people come into the kitchen and it's like, well, I only thought about it like this, or I don't like, one of my favorite things to do besides getting people outside of recipes is to maybe make people think differently about the myths that we create about certain food ingredients or food concepts, right? But also bringing our food stories into that. Why do we think this? What is that? Let's dig into what brought us to this understanding or these feelings that we're having about this food that I hate, or this food that I can only have this way. And I can only eat my grandmother's thing. And you know what I mean? Like, it's like we put ourselves in these boxes, right? And that's what our system is boxes. We're checking boxes, we're compartmentalizing. And what I want to do is break down the walls of the boxes, get out of the boxes. And so, one of the things that I see when I'm cooking with people in community is that transformation happening right before my eyes. When we're able to bring in farm fresh produce, we're able to really make that connection between the land and the food, and we are cooking together and we are caring together for ourselves and each other. And then we break bread and we share that in the stories and the impact that just that moment is having on us. And I have people that, you know, I've known for years that have, you know, maybe came to a workshop years ago that still contact me to this day. I did a workshop with you years ago, and someone just emailed me yesterday, you know, asking questions, right? So it's like we plant that seed, right? And then we nurture that seed to see it grow. And there's just so many analogies that I can make about that. And I think, like you said, that plant in this kind of concrete jungle space and that struggle for it to survive and live in what appears to be a prison, right? And so, and sometimes that prison is in our minds. And so,
well, and that may be intentionally placed there too. I mean, it's how to have more agency. And I'm feeling this in my life. How do I really increase my agency? And so this, and I'm very grateful to the people who are doing this, who are, and that's, I want to hear more stories of the entrepreneurs you work with, because we haven't really talked too much about City Foods Kitchen, and what people are creating, making their own economy and trying to lift up a different economic system.
absolutely. You know, I've been doing this work for a long time, but I definitely know that in 2020, COVID, and then the murder of George Floyd and the uprising here in the Twin Cities, you know, I was born on 38th, you know, off of 39th in Oakland, in that area where George Floyd was murdered, and where my Uncle Mo did a lot of work. But my mom was from Rondo, and so I have ties to both of those places. And then I was doing work in North Minneapolis at Breaking Bread Cafe, and so and now I live in North Minneapolis. But when the uprising happened, it affected all of the those home bases for me. It was huge impact on University Avenue and in St. Paul, huge impact in the community where I was born over in South Minneapolis, and in North Minneapolis off of Broadway, right? All of this uprising, right? And people really crying out for change. And so when I think about those different pieces, that's where my work lives now. And so many of the entrepreneurs that we work with at City Food Studio, what I was trying to say was that in 2020, I saw such an uptick in interest in people. And there was the great quitting, right around there, where people just were leaving their jobs. They were like, I cannot do this work. My consciousness is not aligned in so many ways. And so people were leaving their jobs, going into entrepreneurship, and many of that has been food entrepreneurship. And we've seen an explosion of Black-owned businesses starting out with selling plates and different things like that. And so, you know, my work is centered around how do we get you from selling plates to really being a viable business. And so, so many different entrepreneurs come out of City Food Studio, as well as I do work with Neighborhood Development Center and do training with entrepreneurs. And so there's many people that are really trying to monetize in this economy their talents and their gifts for food and cooking. And there's so many, I mean, there's food trucks, there's, you know, right now out of our kitchen, we have a Soul to Soul is a soul food, a barbecue business out of our space. There's so many different entrepreneurs that come out of there, and really, you know, that gap between cooking and feeding people and like having the business acumen is really where my work sits in understanding licensing and how do we create sustainability, but then move from sustainability to regeneration. How do we build something that we don't have to struggle and strain for the rest of our lives and hope for retirement by a certain age? And so, but yeah, and then at the farm, now we're supporting food entrepreneurs from growers, and that link between the land, the farm, and the market and the table. And so that is really the work that we're doing within these spaces. In George Floyd Square, there are a number of, it's actually, I'd say it's like almost a little Black Wall Street, because there are a ton of, right in that 2-block corridor, almost 20 Black owned businesses, and some of them are food businesses. There's Bachota Coffee, there's Smoke in the Pit, there's Just Turkey, and a lot of the businesses that are there are still trying to recover from what happened in 2020. And there's been a lot of extraction from what happened with George Floyd Square. Many organizations got a lot of money off of that, but a lot of that money didn't come back to support this actual corridor where that tragedy happened. And so, right just in the last couple of weeks, we had to fight and go down and testify at City Hall with the City Council, because they were trying to do a special assessment to charge all of the residents and business owners for the development. And it was like a clear like.
Yeah, we're actually down to our last 33 seconds.
Sorry.
Michelle Cunningham,
You
no
go
worries.
on.
I know. CEO of Healthy Roots Institute, Shell Kitchen, City Food Studios, Executive Director of Frogtown Farm, and many, many more. Happy Juneteenth. And on June 20th, Saturday, June 20th, a Community Peace Festival. So freedom, we're all free. We all lift up your freedom and my freedom are interconnected. And so is it connected with that little swallowtail butterfly and those plants stuck in that.
Yes.
So
thank you
take
so
care.
much, Laura.
Thank you for listening. Have a great day.